Okay. Good morning and good morning to friends, peers, and colleagues in both North America, Asia, and across the world. Before I begin, I would like to let everyone know that we have on-site interpretation services available. So please click the interpretation icon below, and it's the one with the little globe on it, if you will like to have the interpretation available to you. And you should be able to select the language that you want to hear, either Japanese or English. So my name is Shiori Uchida, and I am the student assistant at the Center for Japanese Research located in the Institute of Asian Research and the SPPGA here at the University of British Columbia. 北米アジア、そして全世界の友人、仲間、同僚の皆さん、おはようございます。そしてこんにちは。私の名前は内田しおりと申します。私はブリティッシュコロンビア大学のアジア研究所と SPPGA の下にある日本研究センターで、学生アシスタントとして勤めています。今日はお越しくださり大変ありがとうございます。Now I'd like to start by thanking everyone, including those watching the recording, for joining us in this dark moment of war. I would like to acknowledge the suffering, death, and destruction endured by the people of Ukraine under the Russian invasion. We stand with the Ukrainian people through these horrifying developments. And today we meet in the spirit of peace, justice, reconciliation, and a common search for solutions to common human crises. Moreover, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, as well as the Wisinech people, who have called this area home for many thousands of years and continue to do so today. We invite you to reflect upon the indigenous lands that you are on today as well. And lastly, I would like to thank everyone involved in making this event a reality, including Christina, my fellow co-research assistant at CJR, who is working this event behind the scenes today, Panthea, Fuma, and Hari, all assistants at the Konwakai Chair, and Dr. Eve Serbergen, director of Konwakai Chair and CJR. I also want to thank the Monk School at the University of Toronto for their continued support, and also the Natakalam Interpretation Services. Now I'll turn over the floor to my co-moderator here today, Risako Yang from Toriaizu.
Hello, so thank you so much. I'm Risako, and I'm currently based in New York City, but work in innovation strategy. I was born and raised in California before attending a school in upstate New York. And so from my name, you might guess I'm half Japanese and half Chinese, but was born and raised in the US. So cross-cultural tensions and differences have always been a part of my life, and I'm super, super excited to be part of this conversation. In 2020, I co-founded Toriaizu with a few other multilingual, multicultural folks who are equally passionate about social issues. And in 2020, with the resurgence of social conversations, we realized there are very few places to talk about it in Japanese. So we started this online platform where people could speak up and learn, because oftentimes it is really scary to talk about topics that we don't know much about. So hopefully we can bring in that culture of, just speaking up and learning together in today's session as well. I'm really excited to learn from everyone, and that's kind of a spiel of who I am. Back to you, Shiori.
Thank you, Risako. So the Center for Japanese Research, along with the Konwakai Chair, has proudly hosted an array of events related to politics, economics, and culture in Japan, Asia, and the international world. This event series marks a revolutionary step towards marking a future for all the young leaders across the world from the corners of Asia. Now today is part one, where we will be having an open discussion with everyone here today. We want to create a very open, welcoming space for everyone to speak about your own experiences, opinions, thoughts, and just anything else that you might want to talk about and share. And then next week, we will be having panelists from an array of social justice movements, politics, and education to discuss more concrete solutions and steps to be taken in the form of a Zoom webinar. So we invite everyone to join us next week as well. Now today, we have our in-Zoom interpreters from Natakalam who will be providing a simultaneous translation throughout the event. So you should be able to choose an option of English or Japanese when joining the Zoom, as I said beforehand. But please keep in mind that interpreters can only interpret what they hear. So as such, please use headsets or earbuds with a mic when speaking if possible. If not, that's totally fine as well. But we would appreciate it if you can kind of speak clearly into the computer mic that you have. Moreover, we ask that you please change your name on Zoom to your first name, if possible, last name, and then the university that you go to or organization that you're a part of, so that our interpreters will be able to correctly pick up on your name and organization when you do speak. But if you're concerned about privacy, we also understand as well. So please feel free to do whatever that you're comfortable with. And on the topic of privacy, we're also recording the session to be released to the general public for viewing. So if you're concerned about your identity, you may choose to not turn on your camera or type your opinion in the chat or personally message either me or Risako, and we'll be happy to read out your comment or thoughts or questions out loud. Or just let us know at any time, even after the event as well.
So yes, so as Shirley mentioned, we're really hoping to create kind of a safe and welcoming space where everyone can speak up regardless of how much you know, the language or expertise, and would love to hear your thoughts and experiences with topics like social norms, systemic reasons behind finding a voice or systemic barriers to finding a voice, social justice causes for the youth, political participation, the future, the economic future for this new generation, as well as possible solutions that we could brainstorm together today. And this conversation is really for us. It's a small group, so really try to make it work for you. Talk about what you want. And to do so, please feel free to use the raise hand feature, or send something in the chat. We'll make whatever work for everyone who's here today. And we're really excited to continue.
Thanks, Risako. So yeah, on that topic, honestly, just feel free to talk about, we do have topics in hand and questions to ask, but if at any point you feel like you want to bring a topic up or you want to discuss a certain issue, please feel free to do so. It's a very fluid and flexible discussion that we have planned here today. And as well, please don't feel like what you have and what you have to say is of any more or any less importance. We really want to encourage everyone to kind of speak about their own experiences and any thoughts that they've had. Every single one is really crucial to what we're discussing here today, I believe. So with that, I want to kind of start off with a kickoff question just to kind of get everyone's mind in the mood and in the right topic. So starting off with, I guess, more of just a broader picture of things. So I know in recent years we've seen, I guess, movements such as like the Black Lives Matter movement to more topics related to gender equity, LGBTQ rights, and then more recently, Peace for Ukraine. And so such of these social justice movements aimed at promoting change within institutions or social norms or even policies have ignited youth participation around the world. But I've kind of also realized that social justice movements aimed at breaking tradition and social norms are still very much stigmatized in many Asian countries, including Japan. Just a little background about myself is that I grew up in the United States, but I was born in Utsunomiya-shi, which is in the Tochigi Prefecture just north of Tokyo. And so while I did grow up in the US, I actually eventually came back to live in Tokyo when I was 15 years old and went to and eventually graduated from a Japanese high school. So I still remember like that my passion for social justice, particularly on sexual violence and sexual harassment towards women, didn't really translate to a lot of people around me. But to some others, a handful of others, it did. So I want to kind of kick off today's event by asking you all to maybe share a time when you felt like you wanted to speak up against a norm or tradition, or maybe you felt a sense of discomfort at something that was being discussed in front of you, or maybe something that was done onto you. I think in Japanese we call it iwaka, towards something, but felt you really couldn't speak up. And that can be because maybe you felt like you didn't want to kind of like break the so-called, environment or atmosphere, or maybe you felt that you were being, oppressed or suppressed in some kind of way. Maybe you felt that it wasn't the right time to kind of bring the topic or subject up. But in any case, I just kind of want to ask if you all have any kind of experiences in regards to maybe like, questioning the norm that you have in Asia. So please use the raise hand function if you'd like to speak, or if you have any like, thoughts and comments that you want to kind of put in the chat as well, please feel free to do so. But yeah. Does anyone want to kind of start things off? I know it can be like a bit intimidating. And please feel free to, oh, yes. Sorry, may I ask how you pronounce your first name?
My first name is Boyambile, but you can just call me BB. Yes.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
BB.
I'm third, fourth-year student in International Christian University here in Tokyo. Nice to meet everyone here. I just wanted to say something on what you said, like sexual harassment and then violence against women, like sexual assaults in Japan. Recently, I saw a post on Instagram, a news saying that Japan, there are so many schools that in Japan still have that ponytail ban because apparently it sexually entices men. And then after seeing that, I was pretty frustrated what it was saying because apparently Japan has a lot of. I didn't go to Japanese high school, so I don't know. I didn't know about this, but then apparently, Japanese high schools have a lot of strict rules against female students because they find it sexually enticing, like male students. It will distract male students from studying or like focusing on studies and focusing on school activities and stuff. But I thought that how they're handling this problem is really wrong. They're putting a lot of strict rules on female students, but it's not female students who are purposely doing all those stuffs, to be honest, because recently I have found a lot of disturbing events in stations where a lot of salarymen around their 30s above will ogle at like uh, high schoolers, looking up and down, checking them out a lot, and then like they're just doing nothing. They're just wearing their clothes, they're just going to school, they're going back home, and then I thought it's the problem is not within the uh, female students, but it's problem within how male in the Japan are perceiving female students in a more uh, sexual way, because there are so many like uh, Japanese cultures, like the manga culture, where they will draw female characters really like young that you can't even tell their age. Sometimes when you watch manga, and it gets really disturbing. And then I think the problem is within how to educate young boys to older men on how to respect women, I think, and then not on putting more strict rules on female students, because I personally don't see that working at all. And also how women has such a like small voice, and then like fear of speaking out in the public, because when you're experiencing sexual assault in public, uh, it's really hard to speak out. I remember my friend and I were in Densha, and then and in train and subway, and then she felt she went through a sexual assault, and then she couldn't speak out at all because she was too scared to disturb the people inside the Densha, because in the rushing hours they can be really sensitive, and then she didn't even know, even if she would scream, if she would get any help, or end up getting maybe the perpetrator getting more violent against her. So I think there's a lot of social issues of like gender issues of women being not able to speak out, and then rules that doesn't even work that are being put to women that should be maybe focusing more on how to educate men instead. Thank you.
Thank you, Bibi. Those were, oh my goodness, such like insightful contributions to this discussion. I also know that a lot of people, my friends, who went to ICU, and I myself went to the high school. under ICU or like the ICU high school. So I like completely understand where you're coming from in terms of the I guess like the topics that you raised that you felt through your university's experience. I think in particular, like what you said about I guess like a lot of like the responsibility of even like changing these like issues falls on women themselves and not on the men who are just as much like, you know, a part, if not more so, right, of like why these issues are such a big problem. And I remember, yeah, like almost all of my high school female friends had gotten groped at one point or another in high school on their way to school, which is crazy in terms of like how realistically you look at it. It shouldn't be the norm, right? But it really certainly is. And for a lot of guys, at least in my grade and in my school, most of them didn't see it as a me problem because it didn't really happen to them. And so why would they be really concerned, right? And just like really, that reminds me of like one of my male classmates who was talking about, you know, seeing someone, like I think a female classmate, like getting groped on the train, but then they didn't do anything about it. And they were kind of like jokingly talking about it, right? So like that like really showed me when I was like a high schooler, you know, female high schooler in Japan, how I guess like alone I felt in terms of like even trying to change, just because I felt, well, one, like the female classmates and people that I have around me are all experiencing the same thing, but it's to the point where it's a norm, right? It's like so normalized that we can't really, it feels like we can't do anything about it. And then our male counterparts think that it's a joke, or it thinks that it's just something that happens to everyone. So why are you making such a big fuss about it? So that's a really like those are really good, great points that you brought up, and especially with the ponytail ban as well. That brings up a good topic of I think just like the whole dress code that we have in schools. And I know this isn't just a topic that relates to Japan. It's like across the world, universal, right? In terms of like skirt length. I know in like a lot of schools, I think in the rural areas of Japan, they even like check like the underwear, like the undergarments of like female students to make sure that they aren't like an obscene color, or like they aren't, you know, like it's just mind blowing to me that a lot of this is put on the woman or like the female students to not like, you know, make them be objectified by their male counterparts or their male teachers, you know. So those are really great points. And thank you for bringing that up. Oh, I also want to kind of like just make it like an open discussion. So if anyone wants to just kind of like jump into the discussion, feel free to do so. And BB, if you want to like kind of like also answer, or like, you know, just talk casually, that's great too. But thank you for that contribution.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing such a difficult topic and, you know, being so open and willing to share your personal experiences, both of you really, because it's so hard to think about how close it is, and yet how, like you said, Shiori, earlier, like even though it hits so close to home for us as women, it feels like such a distant issue for men, even though we like coexist in the same spaces, in the same schools, in the same classrooms, and theoretically receive the same education, which really brings up the issue of like the sexualization of the female bodies and the male gaze is not just perpetuated by men, but also internalized by women. And I remember always being so frustrated when my dad would tell me that I was wearing clothes that were too revealing, but even more angry when it was my mom telling me the same things, because I was like, aren't you not also a woman frustrated by these double standards and the sexualization of the female body? And like, is it not my freedom? But I also know that they were trying to protect me from the exact same sexualization of the female body. So it's always so difficult when you're trying to pass on these, like, when you're trying to protect, but also not trying to pass on these horrible standards onto the next generation. And would love to know, Bibi, and Shuri, if you have any thoughts on like how to, you know, I guess it kind of brings us to the next topic, but how to break past the norm or prevent generations of the same type of standards and tradition being passed on. But also would love to talk think back to the, you know, the really everyday actions that build up and continue to perpetuate gender standards and gender norms.
I think on how to break the norm, I have a few comments. Kind of example from South Korea. South Korea, exactly with Japan back in the days, they had really strict norm against women, female students in middle school and high school, where they also have to wear the white underwear and then all these stuff. But then they're all being broken down, and then the norms are being changed, because no matter how the women's voice are small in the society, they gather up more together, and then they keep mentioning the problems, where I think eventually it leads up to change. Like I think we can also give an example of #MeToo movement. And then I think it's just that we have to encourage more younger generation, especially girls, to speak out, be like courageous, like give them chance, and then encourage them and make them more brave to speak out more. And then obviously also like an education to bring out more social issues of women's rights. I remember I'm doing this empowerment program with middle schoolers and high schoolers in Japan. And then in there we talk about social issues and global issues, and then SDGs and stuff. And then I try to, as an like international student, I always try to let them be aware of uh, what's that? Gender inequality in Japan, because sadly they don't think they are experiencing gender inequality, because when you think about gender inequality, they mainly think about like, oh, women don't have right to vote. Some women don't go to schools in some countries, but I go to school. I have the right to vote in the future. They focus on more general ideas when they don't see the small micro misogyny that they face every day. And then I try to bring that up more. So I think like especially like talk like this, and then like in school clubs, and then like Voice Up ICU, or like Voice Up Sophia Waseda. I think those are a great platform to encourage women, and then make them realize what's wrong, and uh, what they're facing shouldn't be something that's normal. And then I think I really like the Korean uh, example, because they start a movement taking off the croissant, where corset sorry, corset, and then where they movement for feminists to take, break down the norms, and then come together and fight against the the sexism existing in Korea. So I think that's needed in Japan too, because I see that women have really small voice, and they're really scared to voice out in this society. I'm sorry this became really feministic, but thank you.
No, please never apologize for that. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, that's so such great comments. I think in regards to like having a platform like Voice Up Japan, I completely agree. I remember back when I was in high school, because I believe Voice of Japan is a very recent, like maybe created in 2019, 18. So that was like before, I guess, like, or right when I graduated high school. I didn't really have any of like the platform where I could just go and talk to my, peers and, people that were just around the same age as me about these topics of like social justice and things like that. And I remember like back in high school, I created this human rights club with like some of my friends. It was the first ever like social justice thing that ever happened at my school. Even though it was like more of like I guess more of a returnee school than compared to other schools in Japan. And even still, like I would be like labeled like a raging feminist with from like my male peers, right? And like that just like kind of really pushes for the narrative that if you see something that you want to question, you really shouldn't, because that's not the way we do things around here. And it really shows how like that can be really internalized within like yourself as well, right? Like because you live and grow up in something like this, you're like kind of wired to think that this is the norm, and why should we even question it? I know like a really great example. I don't know if it like really directly pertains to sexual violence and sexual harassment in general, but one of like the I guess like the questions I had in high school was the term joshiroku, which is a very interesting word, I think. I also want to hear kind of everyone's thoughts on this if you know the term, but essentially like joshiroku translated directly into English means woman's power or woman power, but it really does not mean anything of the sort. It basically means like you use a term based, for example, if let's say you were carrying around like tissues, then people would be like, oh, you have joshiroku, or you have like a power of the woman, meaning, oh, you have like traits of being a woman. I think it really equates to like being more like stay at home and like being more caring and nurturing, those like kind of feminist or feminine sorry um at least the qualities of being a female, I should say. And so, for example, like if you're more gentle and if you're more like, caring and kind, then you'd be labeled, oh, you have joshiroku, or you have that power of a woman. And I was very shocked when I first heard this word, coming from the United States, moving to Japan as a 15-year-old. And so I kind of like raised, a questioning voice with my peers. And I did a speech in front of like my school about it, and a lot of people, or at least a lot of girls, came up to me, my female classmates, and they're like, "We never really thought of it like that, but that's like kind of true, like what you're saying is kind of weird in terms of like why would we label ourselves as such and such, right? When in reality that can be for everyone. Like everyone can be kind and nurturing and not be labeled like a female in a degrading way. And so I guess it just really comes down to like I guess a lot of like young people, whether it be because of the media or because of the education system, really don't or aren't wired to kind of like think or question their norms. And so once that door opens, I feel like we have that door opens and then we have platforms where people can like readily talk about things without fear of being like isolated or kind of like being like told that they're a feminist. Then we can kind of have that conversation going where it's more natural to talk about these issues with others, and it's more like it's that is itself is more normalized, I feel. But yeah, I think in general, like what you said about like platforms and having those like spaces, like safe spaces where people can talk, is so important. And I'm really glad that Voice of Japan and Toriaizu and other platforms are coming up and are like um creating these spaces for people. And I really do hope that like that continues on into the future as well. But yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Shruti. I think you sent this in the chat earlier, but I'd also, we're thinking about all these young voices that are making an effort to really voice their discomfort and present, resist and change the status quo. And we've talked about a lot about Asia and Japan specifically, where there's a lack of motivation or the stigma against questioning things, like students who ask why too much in the classroom, or young leaders who want to incite change are really heavily criticized. And when you're students in Asia, you're often praised for how disciplined you are, how agreeable you are. I want to discuss what it is that you think causes these standards and other social pressures that prevent young leaders from, inciting change. I know, Bibi, we've asked you a lot, but other participants like Kuma, Heidi, Christina, if you'd like to participate or have any thoughts.
I guess I can kind of just start us off with that question. I know it's like a really packed question, and it's like there's so many, like potential answers, or I don't even know if there's like one, one answer to that question. But in terms of like systemic causes, so I think Risako, what you mean by that is more of just like what are the underlying, roots behind this like overall broad problem of like inciting change in terms of social justice. Well, at least when I was in Japan, I really noticed the big role that media or I think in Japan you call it maskomi, plays in such conversations. So specifically, I'm talking about I guess like widely consumed media. So that would be more of like the waido shows, or so-called. I know like some. I can't remember all of them, but like Zip is one like really known one that a lot of people watch. There's also the Good Morning Show or something like I can't recall the names. But those shows really do push forward the norm that a lot of, I guess, more traditional people living in these countries want you to know, which is, for example, like how a woman should be, right? I remember like in one of the what is it, the morning episodes of Dip, like, or constantly there'll be like sections of like how to, like act more like a woman, or like how to like be more girly, so that you can like, I guess like show off to your guy friends, or like such like narratives are so common in Japanese media. And I know like BB, you also mentioned about trains, and how that like the trains itself are like you know really common places for a woman to kind of have these like really bad experiences on. I remember, on my way to school in our uniforms, we would see advertisements pasted on like the windows of the trains of really over sexualized women in uniforms or in lab coats. And there would be like a male character right next to it who would be in a suit, like a normal suit, like a lab scientist would be in. But then for that woman in the same advertisement, she would be over sexualized, right? And that just kind of really shows you how like advertisement and media and just the whole, I guess like the whole industry itself really controls the narrative of what is acceptable, what is like should be celebrated, and what should be accepted, and then what shouldn't. And I really do want to hear everyone's thoughts on like what they think about the media and how like media perpetrates like such streams of thinking. I know this isn't just like a topic within Asia. I know media is like a controlling factor for everyone everywhere, right? And media really controls how you perceive things. But I think like, especially in Japan, or just because I used to live there, a lot of people, especially older generations, consume a lot of media in forms of TV. So it's not more like social media and stuff, but it's more of like television and like news and things that are more traditional and so-called traditional. And those news medias and sources really utilize that to their full extent to kind of, if there's like an upspark or if there's like a protest of like young people, they quickly squash that. And they have the power to do that. So sorry, I'm like going off of tangents here, but I think like one of my answers would be like maybe like the media itself. But yeah, I want to hear if like anyone else has any like opinions they have about any others, or about media as well.
Really briefly, like I know it's when you say media, you mean like TV and advertisements, but I was talking with friends in Japan and they were talking about Instagram posts that they see on their like explore page. Is that what it's called? And I see it too because of the content they interact with. And it's like, I don't know, it's so targeted to women working around the male gaze. I know we're really hyper focused on like gender roles, but I think it perpetuates more than just sexism and gender roles. It also perpetuates like heteronormativity, like toxic masculinity that really kind of keep adding in a negative direction to each other. But there are all these posts like how to look cuter, how to look more feminine, or like small things that you can do to make yourself look more attractive to your boyfriend before Christmas, or things like that I've seen that are really scary. And it's not just one account making them, and it's not a and it's made by women, and it's made like promoted in a way that's helpful to women. He like little tips to help you. And I think there's just so much added at the core that we need to dissect, and it's going to take a long time to get around these issues. It's not just Japan, I'm sure, but I've seen very specifically, like you said, just because I have friends in Japan, these very specific Instagram posts that are kind of disturbing.
Is it okay if I say something? I'm so sorry.
Of course, please don't apologize. Please, we love to hear your perspective.
And I'm sorry, I'll be also focusing more on Japan because I mean I've been living in Japan for the last few years, and then the only things I see is the issues in Japan. And then as for the media that she already was talking about, it's so media in Japan, like I really like is so behind. I really, when I turn on TV, never were a day that I wasn't frustrated with the things I'm watching on TV. Like I'm finally watching news about like women's rights, but then they always had to put like pink or like, you know, like really stereotypical misogynistic stuff. Or I see, and then I change my channel because I'm too frustrated, and I see ads. And there are so many ads that are telling women to shave their hair so you can be beautiful and look beautiful in your boyfriend's eye. And then I changed my channel, and then there's only one woman sitting among a bunch of male idols or like celebrities, and then not talking, just keep saying hey, hey, and then like stick this, and then just reacting really like feminine, like how they supposed to act. And then I get so frustrated. And then I see like the government, you know, how government officials talk about what kind of policies we should make and all this stuff. But then I see there are only really few women are sitting in there. And even the women that are sitting in those seats, sometimes they're not actually for women's rights. Sometimes they can be actually against women's rights. They can be actually really misogynistic. And then I see those stuffs on TV, and I always think, sadly, it's gonna take a while for Japan to change, and then have more women to participate, like truly, not just to like show the foreign states that, oh no, Japan do have female like government officials. Look at them, there are like 2-3, but then those 2-3 women are just doing what the most men are telling them to do, and they can't even make that much changes. So I always get frustrated how it's gonna take a while for media, which is such a big platform for to change the opinions of people, so far behind. And also moving on to another thing, recently, I think it's related to what Misako-san was saying. Recently, I saw on Twitter this female pro gamer. She made a comment at home saying like, "Oh my God, women with A cup or B cup are basically not human. Like they don't have human rights. If you have C, then you're like giddy giddy, like barely there. And if you have D, okay, you're human." And then she continued on saying, if you're a man who's below 170, I think, or 175, then also like you don't have human rights. You're not a human. And then she got so backfire on the social media by both genders, I think, but mainly males, because oh my God, she's like saying men are not men because she's under because they are under 170. And then she got a lot of contract canceled right away. She got kicked out of Red Bull, a lot of stuff. And I was reading that a lot, and then I was really frustrated with her too. Like, why would she say something against women like that? Like, you know, you should be on par with women. And then I was also criticizing her. But then I saw another feminist saying that it's so funny how she's being fired for saying that when so many male idols on TV shows make fun of like fat women, like, oh, if you're fat, then you're basically not human. And then they're just like, oh my God, that's so funny, you're so right. And they just laugh it off and no one cares about it. But woman says something like that, and then they're attacking her. And then the main part that she got attacked was also because she made a comment about men. And if she didn't make a comment about men, then probably people were just laughing. Oh my God, look at what she said. That's so funny. And then I think also that was like another, and then it was like a new way of seeing how when women say those stuffs, we shouldn't be criticizing them, but also like see them more as a victim of the society, how they've been brainwashed and they've been like made to think those stuffs, thinking that that's how the society normally thinks, and that's how if I say this, then I will sound cool or like something like that. So I'm sorry if I went off the track, but that's what I want. That's what I was thinking when I was hearing you two guys talking. Thank you so much.
Oh, yes, like all those points. I want to go back to like what you said about like the government itself. I also think that the government also plays a really big part in I guess like the systemic reasons behind such like or like such slow changes in society, in Japanese society. Especially what you said about in regards to like women's rights. I remember I once went to I think it was like the Women's International Conference that they host every year, and it was held in Japan in 2019. So I went, and just that time, Prime Minister Abe was speaking right after Malala Yousaf about I guess like having this like I believe he said like Abenomics is like for women, and like he wants to really like change how women in Japan work and their work environment. And I thought it was just so ironic because most of his cabinet members and his like government is full of men, old men, who really will not fight for young women or people that aren't them and their rights at all. Right, and like we've seen this especially with I know like in elections, a lot of, or I guess like in recent years, because of like the whole conversation around like quotas and like setting quotas for women to be able to run as candidates and then get these positions in government. I know like a lot of parties in Japan, political parties in Japan, are putting these like female candidates up, but they do it just to say that just to show the numbers. Hey, we had however much percentage, like 10%, 20% of women running this year. So you can't say that we aren't, we can't say that we're sexist because we have women. But in reality, they just use these women either as pawns. So if the women like really aren't really there to serve any purpose except for just be the surface of a problem, or B, they just serve in these like in the to run in these places where they're definitely going to lose, right? So like the parties that, or sorry, the places and regions that the party doesn't really care about, and they just place that like female candidate there just for the numbers. So that's like such a problem that like occurs like without like just pointing and calling out that one party. It's something that relates to all parties, and like it's just in the entire government, how elections are run and how the government is run, right? And a lot of times like it does nothing to push forward like changes. Not just about women either, right? But maybe it's about like LGBTQ rights. And the fact is that like a lot of rights aren't granted in Japan. And why is that? It's because a lot of politicians, especially old school politicians, aren't willing to go and move forward, and they don't want to let go of like this tradition, and that's how we've always done things. And it's so hard, it's so hard to kind of break break away from that, I guess, especially if you're not in the political scene yourself. And so I know that there are a lot of like frustrations from like people, like university students and high school students and just young people in general who are really like intrigued in politics, and who want change. That's where their frustrations come from, is the fact that like nothing really can come out of this anything if the leaders and if the people making the decisions aren't willing to do anything. I know that does bring up like a really good, I mean, maybe we could talk about it later too, but like about political participation and how the youth can play a big part of that. So yeah, that's, I think we can kind of have that conversation later. But also on the topic of like what you said about when like the Twitter user, and when she when she said like two things that were like of I guess like equal controversy. It was more of like the fact that she kind of attacked males that garnered attention. And I guess that's like, that can really translate to a lot of things that we see in Japan, right? Where like I guess because it is a very I mean, regardless of the percentage of like actual biology, it is a very male dominant, patriarchal society that we live in Japan, whether it be in our workplaces or it's like really intriguing because at school we're 50-50, but then once you get into the workplace, it's not, right? And you really see that. And we really hear that a lot in like, university students who graduate and then who go into the workforce and are like, wait a sec, why am I not being treated like, equally when we were, it's just the fact that a lot of the things falls on like the male, way of perceiving things and how it's perceived and then how it's like how it garners attention. So yeah, really great topic point that you brought up, BB.
Yeah, youth participation in politics is so hard because I feel like there's always the stigma of like, oh, they're too young to know what they're talking about. They don't know enough about the reality. But then because of like those sentiments and statements always cause us to hold on to the past and hold on to past perceptions of what's normal. And it's really scary to change, but I think Japanese society is especially afraid of change. And even if you objectively like it, I feel like the fear of change from the older generation is such a major force that the younger youths, I see like all these amazing youth activists working hard, but it's such a hard wall to come against. And I wonder what we can do to counter that.
Yeah. I think, yeah, feel free to jump in if you have like anything you want to say. But on topic of like government, I guess we can like really ask the question of like more on like politics, specifically like how voting and I guess like in general, like not just voting too, but like, engaging in like these political matters, right? How that like is important for youth. And what can we do to kind of encourage more of the interest in youth? I know that in Japan, I mean, it's around the world, but specifically in Japan and like other Asian countries, youth participation in politics, especially in terms of like voting in elections, is very, very low in terms of ratings. I mean, in general, like Japan, it's really low, like voting percentage wise, is very low. But especially in the youth, I know we rank really low in terms of like what percentage of people vote. I remember at my high school, we did like a mock election or like where we voted at the same time that the general elections were going on in Japan. And I think like 17% of our whole grade voted, which is like, which is mind blowing to me. But I guess that really kind of illustrates the reality that we have in terms of the fact that like young people don't see, politics as something that they have interest in, and B, they don't think that they can make a change. And that's actually a really interesting subject to talk about because I know, I guess when you look at numbers, there's so many of the older generation in Japan. I know, yeah, there's like the koreika, or the fact that there's like so many seniors in Japan right now, that like even if everyone who are eligible to vote above 18, so the young people vote, they still wouldn't reach like the percentage of like old people who are voting right now. So like that's crazy, right? And I think in terms of like numbers of seniors, there's like 33% of the Japanese population are like 65 years or above. I can't tell if this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is like based on like the recent surveys that I've read so far. So it just really shows how like the frustration among like in young people of like, well, if I do something, if I do vote, like how will that change? It's really like kind of reality in a way. So I do see where a lot of people like of my peers are coming from in terms of like not seeing anything, like not seeing a difference at all in terms of like voting. But I do want to kind of ask like how you think voting can be important for the youth and why, or how is it not maybe? But then how can we encourage more of that interest in politics, and what can we change about politics to kind of like change that? Because whether we like it or not, government is where a lot of these policies and laws and regulations come from, so that is where we can make these hardcore changes, right? And also like I guess like the more broad up in the air question of, is it like really up to like us, or is it up to like the politicians and like the adults who are in these leadership positions to like want to garner these interests and want to garner more political participation, or is it up to the education system, or is it up to us? So yeah, really, I guess a broad question of political participation amongst youth. If anyone has any thoughts on this.
I have some thoughts. Yeah, thank you so much for your comments, especially what Misako-san said in the beginning. Japan is really bad with change. I really agree with that. Somehow, they're really fearful against change. They're really, and I think that's the point where they're so satisfied with what they have at the moment because they don't see any problems. And then I think for youth participation, it's really low. It's really low. I can see it. Like I was really shocked. I thought Japan would be really high because I'm half Mongolian and half Japanese, and in Mongolia, youth participation is really low. And then I came to Japan hoping that it will be really high, and then I later found out that it was really low, almost similar to my country. And then I think the one thing about is that first of all, Japanese people don't really tend to criticize their government, like what they're doing. Even if they do, they're mainly people in their 30s and 40s who are mainly interested in economical policies or like trade policy or more like monetary policies. More as for I think youths, they're focused more on youths. I don't think they have that much of the interest to criticize the government. I think that's the problem. And then another thing is that no matter how hard university students make Instagram posts, like Twitter posts, and share around each other to encourage the youth participation, I don't think it still makes that much of difference at the same time. And then for that, I think the government should do some actions to engage more youths to participate in the political in elections, because just a few days ago, South Korea had its the president election, and then I was amazed to know how the youth participation was around 80%, and then it was really amazing how they were really engaged. And then one thing about that is it's cultural. For many years, I think Korea has been really engaged in political what's the political participation, what the government is doing for the citizens, and then they always come together, like protest, and then gather up to criticize the government if they're doing something really wrong. And then another thing is that I heard from my friend, my Korean friend, that apparently Korean government itself tries to increase the participation of youths by doing a lot of stuff. For example, like they literally make memes, or like they make festivals, and they make it more fun. You know, like when you think about elections, like, oh, boring, some things that they're talking that I don't know what they're talking about, so why do should I care? But then apparently South Korean government makes it really fun by trying to get into the youth, like young people's trend. And then I was watching the election with my friend, and then it is actually really like fun, I would say, because they make a lot of like videos, CGI videos, to make like to blend into the K-pop, and they literally dance to K-pop songs, and then they literally do like the taekwondo, right? Taekwondo movement at the what's the sports like, and then they gather in front of like big universities, and then they just like make it really fun, you know, like dancing around, singing around, and I think that also brings a lot of youths to participate. And then also, I think it is important for the people of Japan to know that voting is one of the most enjoyable thing that democracy that gives us, because apparently in Korea, voting is something that's seen as the flower of democracy, because that's the one day that you have the days that you have the most you should be most joyous of what you have, what you can get from democracy. So I think that should be also that kind of image and then idea should be spread around the youths. And then I definitely the government should do something instead of just making it really boring and then like centering more around the 30s and 40s. And yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vivi. I think it's so important, the narrative that we develop around like, how do we talk about things like voting? How do we go about, like, how we choose to talk about it makes a complete difference. Like in the US here, they're saying that if we marketed masks differently, the outlook of the pandemic would have been totally different, or not the masks, sorry, the vaccine. And because we called it the vaccination, that's what got people so riled up. There are all these theories, and it's really interesting the role of marketing, that even the government has to pay attention now. Thank you so much to everyone who joined. Please feel free to join in at any time. I know Shiri's sending the question in the chat. We're currently talking about, why we think it's important for the youth to participate in politics. If anyone has any ideas, we'd love to hear.
Yeah, just to add on, please feel free to just jump in and like talk. Or if you're not comfortable doing that, you can also like type in the chat and we can read it out. We also have interpretation services available. So in that case, you can just click the interpretation and then choose the language that you want. And then you can speak in either language, Japanese or English, whichever you're comfortable with, and we will be able to answer you and talk to you in either one. So that's perfectly fine for those of you joining us today. But yeah. More like, I guess, like the general topic of like political participation. Yeah, we've been talking up until today, or up until now, about more like social justice as well. So I guess like more on like why, such things like, why it's really hard for you young people to kind of talk about, things that they want to talk about and they want to question, such as like social norms, traditions, something that, in our daily lives, we might just be like, why do we have to do this, or why is this such so normalized? It's really hard for us to like raise that voice because maybe because of the government, or we also talked about the fact that media plays a really important role. And so yeah, I guess like in terms of that, that's just like something that led up to this question. But if you guys have any other thoughts and input to have about political participation or social justice, yeah, please jump in and talk.
I know we went straight for a pretty heavy topic, but any opinions on like the role of youth in society? We talked a lot about how there are all these groups and clubs trying to change the way we talk about women, we talk about politics. Any frustrations that we have? Bibi has been very brave in like sharing all your opinions, and Shiri and I are very much enjoying it. Please go for it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Bibi and Shiri has been saying, that youth participation in politics in Japan, in particular, is like a really big problem and concern. Not many young people participate in politics, and I think that leads to policy outcomes that are not very favorable to young people. And I don't particularly know how we could fix this issue, but I do agree with what my friends say. They're like, what's the point of participating in democracy or elections if nothing changes? Which I guess at this point it is kind of true in a way, because we've had the same party consecutively governing Japan, and much of their policies, especially after Abe with Abenomics, and truthfully, it hasn't been helpful to working class people, and especially people who are vulnerable in Japanese society. I think I read a statistics that said that among OECD countries, Japan ranks lowest in terms of single mother poverty rate. And and there's also issues with preschool facilities not being enough in Japan. And definitely these issues aren't just about women, but obviously all of this does affect women in Japan. And I do think that the government hasn't addressed any of these points whatsoever. So I understand why people are very hesitant on voting for the same political party if the outcome is the same. But I don't know. I don't know what everyone thinks of how this could be changed, but I will be interested to know if anyone has any ideas. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. That's such a good point. Like, how are people, I know Bibi brought up how, like in Korea, that people are so invested in voting because they feel like it's a right. But in Japan, if the government has only brought frustration, people are losing hope in the government. And it's not that we can necessarily solve it here today, but I wonder if anyone has, heard of exciting ideas or initiatives going around to change the youth's perception on voting or involvement in society.
Yeah, I guess if anyone wants to talk, just please like butt in. I don't mind at all. I want to really keep it casual. But yeah, in terms of what Fuma said about Japan basically being a single party, right, at this point. I really do agree. I felt at times, even when I do go to vote, when I am in Japan during the summer, it feels really like not that meaningful, right? But at the same time though, it's not just, I feel like it's not just about voting that we can like kind of like raise a voice and like raise that, create that ripple in politics, to say. It can also be through like, demanding more accountability from these leaders in politics and these like positions. I think a good example of that, and something that's relevant for like a few years back is, I don't know if anyone remembers, but it was quite a bit of a controversy back then. It was still like before the Olympics. I think when I was in high school, so a long time ago, I think like 2019, 2020. When Hayashi Daijin, I believe he was the Olympic, well, sorry, I don't know how to say this in English, but he was the Olympic 大会組織委員会 no kaicho. So like, I guess like the leader of the Olympic committee in charge of like the Olympics in Japan. He was quoted as saying something along the lines of women were like not capable and like were not, you know, sawashi. They weren't like good to be I guess in the committee or like take part in the committee because they talk too much, and that raised a lot of controversy to the point where he ended up resigning, I believe, and then I believe someone replaced him afterwards. And I remember like at that time I was really shocked at first, and then also enraged that someone who was representing an international worldwide event that celebrates peace and that celebrates equality and all the good things in the world could say something towards, that's something degrading towards 50% of the population, and it was really, I felt a sense of relief that it wasn't just me who was, outraged. And a lot of people called for more action and accountability to be taken towards these politicians, most of them old men who have one after another of these like, little slip ups, or I guess in Japan you call them like sugen. And then they just really keep them getting swept under the rug. And, I think in Japan's politics right now, like all the people who are like the top figures in Japanese politics have said one or no more than one, I guess, of these shitsugens, or like more than one of these so-called slip ups, and they've all just been fine. Like they've been, it's a slap on the wrist for them, and then they're back into whatever stream of power they are in. And once they hit that certain age, then they can become daijins, and they can become, like these really big figureheads in politics. And unless we like start by like raising this like voice against these people who have these so-called slip-ups, which aren't really at all right, they really do mean it from the bottom of their hearts, and it's shocking that they can be the ones holding these powers, and being the ones that are like making these legislations and laws. We should like have them, we should hold them accountable. And one way to do that is to kind of like when a controversy like what I described before pops up, then we can kind of raise that voice and call for that resignation, or call for change. I believe that we can do that, and it's not just from voting, right? We can also do that by raising that voice when something comes up, and that can like ultimately lead to their resignation, or lead to like some changes in laws. Again, like, yeah, in an idealistic world, it can. So I think that's like one thing that I kind of like thought, at least like through that process of what I experienced. I don't know if anyone else had similar thoughts, or maybe like something that's completely different and maybe opposing to what I said too. Maybe it is really like really difficult for us to even do that as young people. But yeah, what does everyone think about that?
「日本語でもいいですか？」
はい、大丈夫です。
の私はメディアが結構関係してるって思ってて、なんかさっき話していた森氏の発言、IOC のオリンピックのことも、なんか言葉尻だけ捉えて、なんか結構メディアによってこの人は、差別主義者だっていうのを作られてしまったっていうのもあるんですけど、メディアが都合のいいように、本当の情報をねじ曲げて報道するっていう場合もあって、テレビとかも最近テレビ離れしてる人も増えてってるのは、やっぱり本当の情報をあんまり伝えなくなったのかなっていうのを思いました。
はい、ありがとうございます。Thank you so much for your contribution. And my apologies. It was Mr. Mori, not Mr. Hayashi. But yes, I totally agree with what you said about media. I know earlier we did talk about the role that media plays, or maskomi plays, in kind of like creating this like really uncomfortable society that we live in, where we can't really raise a voice against these like discomforts, and that is like really something that's like translated to a lot of people, I think. I know we talk a lot about yeah, like media in terms of like, I guess like advertisements and like what they put out, but also about like wider shows and like I guess like these like morning news shows. Also like social media. I know Risako mentioned how a lot of like social media, especially on Japanese Instagram explore pages, you see like ads and like posts pop up that makes you question like a lot of things that are said. And I know a lot of news sources are either like backed by like a government or some sort, or they run on this like fuel of like traditional norms, or their audience base is more traditional because a lot of older generations watch their shows. So then of course they're going to run on the narrative that's going to be more appealing for them, and that's going to elicit more views and more more appeal from the general public. And so I think media does really portray like or like is like one of the root problems behind such like problems that you mentioned. So thank you for that. I agree completely. Does anyone else want to kind of jump in on the topic of politics before we move on? And again, just want to remind everyone that if you do want to hear this in another language, so for example, if like Japanese is more prominent in language, then you can use the interpretation icon below, click on that, and then click on Japanese to hear everything in Japanese, and then vice versa for English as well. So please use that. But yeah, if anyone else has anything on politics, feel free to type in the chat as well. But I do want to kind of move on to kind of talk about, I guess, what you think are like the advantages that youth can bring to the table in terms of change. So that can be on any of the topics that we talked about today. So either on social justice movements or more about, you know, like politics and political participation. It can also be about economics. I know that in recent years, the financial burden that has been instigated on youth in Japan is also a really big problem. But regardless, like, what do you think are the advantages that youth can bring to the table in terms of all of these, you know, topics? Why do you think it's more important than ever to like have us, you know, young people, be the voices of change? So it's like a more of a wrap-up question, but yeah, feel free to just jump in and talk.
Can I go for this too? Thank you. Thank you for the comments by everyone. And as for this question, I thought it's also like a wrap up of what I've been talking with you guys the whole time on like women's rights, and then like how the things that people see normal is not actually normal, and then the things that I think that's the thing that youths can bring to the table for to change, because in the end the society is this generation, like the youths are the ones who will be living in the future, so it's their future basically. And then I think now that you know how young people are so easy to be or have access to like global issues, and then like global media, they're not just confined in this Japanese media that only portrays really old and cultural value, you know. But then you go out from those Japanese media and you go to English media or on the other Asian medias, and then you see, oh, what we've been doing this whole time was not something that we should have been. What's that? We should have been like keeping up with it, like, and then that's something that we shouldn't have seen as normal. And then I think that's why like people people like Risako-san and Shiori-san bring up more youths together and to talk about social issues, and then to think more about like what can be done and changed. I'm so sorry, my thoughts are all over the place all of a sudden. And what I'm just trying to say is that I think the youths kind of open eyes of the others that what is wrong and what is right, like especially this generation, I think. And then I think this generation youth are really based on community, like we gather up a lot together to make changes, and I see that a lot happening. And then I think that's another like advantages. Yeah, so thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I feel like like you said, the ability for the younger or current generation to really find communities outside of what was previously possible is huge, like using online, social media. So that's definitely a key factor in like we're redefining what it means to be part of a community or what a community encompasses. We're finding, different spaces for people to express themselves. So I think that's going to be a key factor in determining how the youth plays a role in politics and media in the future. Thanks for all your contributions to this conversation, Bibi. We really, really appreciate it. Anyone else have thoughts on why, on Shiori's big question of why youth are able to have a voice?
Feel free to type in the chat as well. I know it's a really broad question, so you can also talk about anything related to like youth, in terms of what you've like experienced or thought of. I know not everyone here might be from Japan, but it can just be about in Asia too, or wherever you're located and situated. I think young people do have that power to make a change and to raise that voice, but it just depends on how they are able to, right? And like what kind of like effects and change they can, and what kind of environment allows them to do that, us to do that. I really like what you said, BB, about like platforms. I think earlier you also mentioned how it's like really important for young people even like to raise that voice and to have that safe space. And I totally agree. I think it really does fall down to like the level. I think it really starts from like if a conversation isn't even started to begin with, then like there really can be no change. And so we really need to have that like baseline where that foundation where first we're like comfortable and we feel like we wouldn't be stigmatized and we wouldn't be isolated if we do raise that voice. And then once we do, then we can embark on more conversations about, okay, then like how can we reach out to like more older generations and audiences that might not be inclined to hear us, but maybe we could change their minds. Or how can we change, things from the grassroots, but I think once like to get to that point, we do need to have a starting point, and that starting point is from these like, places of like a safety net, of like security, where we can like kind of like raise these issues and talk about these issues and not feel like we're weird or we're feminists, radical feminists, or we're all of the above, things that we've been called, if we would be called if we do raise these issues. Once we do take away that, then it would be more of like a more easier world where we can raise these issues. But yeah, I think we did talk a lot today about a lot of like issues surrounding youth, or just in general, like life in Japan. We did kind of like, center off more towards, I guess, sexism and sexual violence in Japan for women, towards women. But I know like there's like, certainly other issues like climate change, which is really rarely talked about in Japan, or more like the financial burden that, a lot of young people are facing, or LGBTQ rights. It can just be about like raising protests against a certain thing, against a certain person. Even the Me Too movement. There's so many issues, right? Social justice issues, political participation, more on education and like economics. There's so many things to cover that youth can like take an active part in changing. And I think it just all falls down to like what we are ready to do and what we are like willing to like move forward with. Yeah. If anyone has any thoughts, I guess, now's like the place to kind of like, talk about what you think and what you feel. Yeah, if you do, you can just jump in or raise your hand. If not, you can also type in the chat, or you can even email us after this event, and we'll be happy to kind of take down your notes or take down your thoughts for the future events as well, because we do plan on having this like a recurring thing. Great. Misako-san, anything you would like to say before I just kind of wrap this up?
No, thank you so much, Trudy, for leading this conversation. It was, I think, a really safe space to kind of rant a little, discuss a little, and learn.
Thank you, Misako-san. And thank you, everyone, for coming today and all of your time and attention. I really do want to thank you for taking your time out of your Tuesday or Wednesday to join us in this discussion. And again, our apologies for the daylight savings time. That completely slipped our minds. It happened this Sunday for North America. And I am so sorry from the bottom of my heart about this slip up in time. But I am glad that you were able to join us for at least the last 30 minutes of this event. I'll also like to say that we do have the same series event happening next Thursday, but it will feature speakers. So it'll be more of like a webinar base where you'll be able to see a panel discussion of the speakers. We have lined up Ms. Yamamoto Kazuna, who is the founder of Voice of Japan. We also have Ms. Miyuki Makri, who is a former deputy mayor of Fukusushi in Fukuoka, and also a former member of the Gender Equality Committee in the Japanese cabinet. And then we have Ms. Yasuzawa and Ms. Furui from No Youth, No Japan. And then Dao Young Jin, who is a professor at Simon Fraser University, here to talk more from the South Korean side and perspective of things on education and youth. So we have a really huge lineup for the Thursday event. So we would really appreciate it if you guys can come out to that event as well. And as I said before, we'll also love to hear any of your thoughts and take on any of these topics. So I believe we will send out an email after this event as well to kind of hear your thoughts. And that way we can kind of translate that to the questions that we ask next week to our panel discussionists. So as well, if you do have any questions, please let us know so that we can ask them. And I want to close off today's event by thanking our wonderful experts and just the support that we've had in creating this event. So thank you to the Konwakai Chair, the Center for Japanese Research at UBC, the Center for Korean Research at UBC, Professor Chibergen and his wonderful team, as well as my co-moderator Isako and her team at Toriaizu. I hope everyone found this discussion insightful and will be able to log off with a better idea of the current state of youth today and what we're doing well and what we can, improve on. So yeah, I hope you all have a great rest of your day or night, wherever you're joining us from, and we hope to see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.